आपके पास नंबर है उनका?
सर मेरे पास तो नहीं है।
यार एक
मेरे
बार उन्होंने मुझे
अभी
कॉल
अब
किया था,
अब
मैंने।
थोड़ा टाइम दो सर। मुझे लग रहा है
ठीक
नहीं
है।
तो फौला सर को ही कॉल करना होगा। मैं अपना मोबाइल भी भूल गया।
ठीक।
मैं अपना मोबाइल भूल गया सर।
कोई नहीं, कोई नहीं, कोई
हाँ। आज बहुत लंबा है। शाम को 6 बजे। हाँ भरत सर। भरत सर।
नहीं। यस।
हाँ भरत सर।
हाँ, गुड मॉर्निंग, बोलिए।
हाँ भरत सर, वो सर का सीवी है ना आपके पास?
हाँ, मेरे पास है सीवी सर का।
हाँ हाँ सर, तो वो शायद पढ़ने के लिए, क्योंकि आज मेरा मोबाइल नहीं रहा, मैं मेल भी नहीं खोल सकता।
आई विल डू दैट, आई विल डू, नॉट ए
ओके
प्रॉब्लम।
ओके, थैंक यू सर। हाँ हाँ।
गुड मॉर्निंग राकेश सर। Good morning, Professor Vinod Mishra.
Good morning. Good morning.
Here is Dr. Bharat Gupta from NIT
Yes.
Patna.
Yes, Bharatji, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. Dr. Amit Joshi from MNIT Jaipur, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
Sir, I will make you as a presenter. I am just changing your role.
I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you are. Yes, sir.
Vinod, sir, now you are a presenter, so you can share. Sir, if you want to
Okay.
just check it out, just, sir, please.
You don't have to introduce.
Sir, just we will introduce you. Just we are waiting. It's already 10, and
Okay.
just
After that,
have
after
it
your
as.
introduction, I'll start presenting. Huh?
Okay, sir.
Sure, sir. Sure,
Okay,
sir.
no issue. No issue.
Amit sir,
Yes, sir.
uh, we will start in like once sir is ready. We'll start in like five minutes. Uh, it's 3:95, I suppose. So slowly the sir, with permission, can we wait for 2-3 minutes?
Yes, yes, of course. Unless people come, who should I talk to?
Yes, I can see, sir. 400 people are there right now around.
Okay.
So
Okay.
in this, just to update you, sir, there are around 2,000 participants are there. 2,200 participants are there in this program, and
Okay.
thousands will join with this platform, Cisco WebEx, and the other will join from the YouTube live link.
Okay.
So we are also doing this YouTube live link where the registered participants as well as some of the unregistered participants also can view you.
Fine. No problem.
And we will take some questions after the session. And with your permission, we will raise these questions to you, and with your permission, and then we will go ahead with that.
Fine. We have two sessions today.
Yes.
I have divided my talk into two parts. So
Sure,
first
sir.
will be 10 to 11. So
Yeah.
I'll allow you 5 minutes. 10:55. I'll complete, and then, or we can take the questions after both the sessions are over.
So it is totally up to you. Whichever the way you like, we will do accordingly.
Because continuously speaking may also tire people.
Yes, sir.
All
Sir,
of them.
we can take 5 minutes, or whenever you feel there is a need of break, we can go for 5 minutes break. There is no problem, sir. The
Fine.
participant will also relax themselves in that
Yes.
case.
Good.
Bharat sir.
Sir, can
So
we start?
Bharat sir, maybe we can start now because it is 10:05 already. Sir.
Okay.
We can start.
So, uh, uh, Vinod sir,
Yes,
can
yes.
we start with your permission?
Yes, of course, I am here.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. Uh, good morning to all. Good morning to Professor Vinod Mishra. Good morning to all the academic coordinators, and good morning to all the participants. On behalf of ICT NIT Patna and MNIT Jaipur, I welcome you on the 6th day of this workshop on ICT tools for teaching, learning, process, and institute. Today we have an
Bharat sir, you are not audible. Bharat sir, you are not audible.
Amit sir, I'm audible.
Sir, but whatever you said in last 10-15 seconds, it is, I think you need
Okay,
to repeat again, sir.
so I'm just sorry for this, sir, because I just we are very grateful to have Dr. Vinod Mishra. I love to introduce him in front of the audience. So, Dr. Vinod Mishra, Professor of English at IIT Roorkee, a PhD in English on the work of Mulk Araz Anand, has served as a faculty in various reputed institutions and contributed academically in many national and international journals and conferences. Starting his career from the Rangachahi College, Majuli of Assam, he works at BIT BITS Pilani, Rajasthan for more than 6 years before switching over to IIT Roorkee, Uttarakhand in 2007. He has published around 21 books, in which 16 are edited and 5 are authored on various aspects of English language and literature. One of his books, entitled Communication Skill for Engineering and Scientists, is used as a textbook and reference book in many reputed colleges and universities. He also has two poetry collections, namely Silent Steps and Other Poems, and multiple waves in his credit. He has guided 9 PhD and presently 12 more are working under his supervision. Besides books, Dr. Mishra has published more than 100 papers, 76 poems, and 21 books review in esteemed journals. He has conducted 10 workshops, conferences, and presented paper in at least 50 conferences of national and international repute, besides delivering around 70 talks in various conferences, workshops, and FTPs. His NPTEL course on soft skill is being rerun consecutively for the fourth time. He has offered one more NPTEL course entitled Effective Writing. Last year, he conducted two TechCube workshops at IIT Roorkee. A life member of Literary Association, Dr. Mishra is on the editorial advisory board of several journals, BOS member of several universities. He has also served as editor-chief of Indian Journal of English Studies for 6 years. IGES is one of the oldest journals of English language and literature. Presently, he is serving as vice chairman of Association for English Studies of India. Dr. Mishra has been the recipient of several prestigious awards, namely AIMS International Distinguished Services Award 2008, AIMS International Outstanding Editor Award 2009, and Excellence in World Poetry Award on 5th January 2010 by International Poets Academy, Chennai, India. Now, I just like to welcome Professor Vinod Mishra. Today, he is going to deliver the talk on the topic of communication across cultures. So I welcome you, sir. Now it's over to you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope I am both visible and audible.
True, sir.
Fine. Dear organizers of EICTE, especially Professor Bharat Gupta, Professor Bineet Saluhaji, Amit Jose, and many more from different academic institutions under the umbrella term of EICTE academies. It actually gives me a profound delight to be invited by EICT academies to deliver a talk on a suitable topic to the participants of this online FDP on the topic ICT tools for teaching and learning. In fact, it would not be in the fitness of things to call my talk as a lecture, but more appropriate to call it the sharing of my experiences with the August gathering present here for the last 6 days. The topic of the FTP is timely and shows the foresight as well as the futuristic vision of the organizers who could see what was there in the seeds of time, which are likely to fructify in the ongoing pandemic, ongoing phantoms of pandemic gripping the entire world. It being the 6th day of the FDP, I think many scholarly talks might have been delivered by erudite scholars, and majority of them on tools. Of course, while tools in the present times have become more relevant, I would actually be talking of a very effective tool, which I call more of a technique than a tool. As majority of the participants of this gathering happen to be teachers engaged in teaching students having multiple backgrounds, age, and experience, dealing with them with utmost honesty and sincerity becomes both challenging and rewarding. This is the reason I have titled my talk as Communicating Across Cultures. As teachers, my dear friends, all of us are communicators. And in a digital world of today, when online lectures have become a reality, we have to exercise our tools and techniques very carefully. We communicate with our students not only to clarify certain concepts, but also to convince them, to reason with them in a controlled manner, lest we hurt their beliefs, values, feelings, also their ways of thinking. My dear friends, a sound communication hinges on the relationship between the communicator and the communicatee. In our cases, we being the communicator and our students being the communicatee, we actually require a sort of balance between the inside and the outside world. And this can realize only when there exists a sound relationship. When I talk of relationship, I'm actually reminded of relationship not at a micro level, but also at the macro level. In this regard, cultural norms has actually become a sine qua non, my dear friends. I mean, it has become very essential. As social creatures, we actually have to maintain different sorts of relationships. Namely, if we are reminded of the Confucian ways of maintaining relationship, he actually talks of the 5 relationships that we as human beings have to maintain in society. And these 5 relationships are the relationship between the ruler and the subject. I mean, this relationship, he calls us the relationship of righteousness. Next to that comes the relationship between the wife and the husband. This is actually a relationship which is based on chastity, purity. The relationship between father and son. The relationship which hinges on love. The relationship between the elder and the younger brother. This relationship is that of an order. And lastly, the relationship between friends and friends. I mean, the relationship between you and me, between the teacher and the taught. And this relationship is a relationship of faithfulness. We as teachers, when we are interacting with the outside world in a web, in a digital world, when we are not able to see who is on the other side, when we are not able to understand who is did what on the other side, and when we have to ensure that our teaching becomes two-way. My dear friends, it is actually very important to mention how, even though we are having a sort of freedom, as one newspaper yesterday mentioned, freedom in disguise. We are also in a digital age maintaining a relationship with our students, which is a relationship in disguise. And you might have felt, as I also feel when I'm delivering an online talk. So this relationship actually reminds us of a 6th century lady and named Mulan. Mulan was actually a woman. And in order to maintain the dharma of being a true daughter to a true father, when the father became ill and the father was not able to discharge his duties, Mulan actually disguised herself as a man and served for 12 years, my dear friends.
Vinod sir,
Yes.
sorry to disturb, but I think, sir, your slides are not visible.
I have not yet started the slides.
Okay. Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir.
I'll very soon start with my slides.
Okay. So sorry to disturb you, sir. Sorry to disturb.
No problem. So this relationship, when we talk of this relationship was between the father and the daughter. And the relationship between the teacher and the taught is also like the father and the children. I mean, a sort of filial relationship. So now, since we are going to talk about communication across cultures, I'm actually going I'm going to share my slides. Have I been able to share now?
Sir, it is visible, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, it will, yes. So, sorry for the interruption. So now we come to the topic itself. My dear friends, Professor Bharat and Vineet Saluhaji, I'm not a man of tools, but a man of techniques. And a man of techniques will always talk about the language that is used because we are communicating. And in the present world, communication has become one of the vital tools. But then when we communicate, we actually communicate with the students. And most of our students do not have the same background. Our students have a different sort of background. So before we go into the nitty-gritty of things, before we expatiate on the process of communication across cultures, let us first try to understand what is communication. My dear friends, when we communicate as teachers, because as teachers we are most of the time under a sort of impression that whatever we say is actually being heard, is actually being understood, and we perhaps on many occasions ignore the fact that the listener on the other side may not be able to understand our point of view. Why is that? Because we have perhaps not formulated our message, we have not formulated our content in the most effective and in the most professional manner. My dear friends, so when we are going to communicate, before that, because much of the thing that we are going to communicate, a lot of preparation is needed. So when we are preparing a lecture, how are we preparing a lecture? Whether we are keeping our audience in our minds, whether we are keeping the background of our audience in mind. So we as teachers are senders. And what the sender will do? Sender will think of a content, sender will think of a piece of information, of a message, and the message has to be transmitted. Of course, the pandemic has actually created such a world where we are not teaching face-to-face in the physical way of the classroom, but we are teaching face-to-face in a different manner where we do not know, for God's sake, who is doing what on the other side. So that a lot of anticipation has to undergo in this process of communication when we are going to transmit our messages. So we filter our message, keeping into consideration the background of our audience, and then, because the reality of the two parties, because communication is actually a process which ensues between two parties. One is a sender, I mean you as teachers, and on the other side as receivers. So the reality of the two people, they are actually different, my dear friends. They are receivers. So when we formulate our message, we actually have to understand that what is the intended meaning, what is the space that we are sharing, and what is the space that they are sharing. And in between, because there has to be a medium, there has actually either to be a verbal message or a non-verbal message. Now, much depends upon the teacher, much depends upon the interlocutor, much depends upon the communicator, how he or she understands the reality of himself and the reality of B, that is the reality between the two. When these two realities come together, there is actually a shared space where we talk, not only verbally, but non-verbally. So most of the times when we do that, perhaps we skip the fact. We skip the fact that the other party is understanding or not. Now, there might be a question in most of the minds as to, is culture also essential when we are communicating? Of course, all of us in some way or the other, we are actually trying to see that the cultures of the two, because culturally, all of us may be different. We share different faiths. And when we define culture, culture can be defined as a process which ensues, which actually entails a common population sufficiently large enough, self-sustaining to produce new generation of thoughts without relying on outside people. As teachers, when we are teaching, or as communicators, when we are communicating, we perhaps skip this fact that the other side person may have a different culture, may have a different belief. Because when we define culture, culture is actually the summum bonum of a group's thoughts, experiences, and patterns of behavior and their contact with other cultures. So likewise, because in a digital world, when we are communicating over the web, we have people of different cultures, not only in India, even in India, we have people of different subcultures. So one culture may have several subcultures, and creating a sort of commonality between the two cultures is actually a very challenging task, but at the same time, it is rewarding also, my dear friends. Now, what happens when we communicate across cultures? What happens when we communicate across cultures? Then perhaps at times we come across a cultural shock. Many of you who are actually lovers of movies, lovers of books, might have come across a very famous book which later was converted into a movie. The name of the book was Namesake, and the name of the author or the novelist was Jhumpa Lahiri. Now, if you have watched the movie or have read the book, you might have found that the heroine of that book, the heroine of that movie, yes, good. If somebody has read it, that's really wonderful. So what happens when Osima is actually the heroine. When Osima goes to West Boston, America, and she's actually expecting a baby. And when she goes to the hospital, because the baby is to take its birth in the hospital. Now, this is actually an expression from there, how she feels embarrassed, how she feels, a sort of cultural shock. And very, very rightly, the writer says, without a single grandparent or parent or uncle or aunt at her side, the baby's birth, which is actually most everything else in America, feel haphazard, only half true. My dear friends, when we are exposed to different culture, we feel that our culture is either interfered with or our culture is at a cross. That is why we say culture, communication across cultures. As she suckles and studies her son, she can only pity him. She has never known of a person entering the world so alone, so deprived. And this happens with most of us when we are exposed to a different culture. But then we are living in a global world, my dear friends. We are living in a world where we have to be exposed to all sorts of culture, and the way you speak, the way you communicate, the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you move, the way you sit, the way you dress, the way you eat, the way you feel, the way you smell. All these things, some way or the other, may have at times a sort of interference which you may feel. But then simply keeping ourselves aside will not do. What we need to do is we actually need to find a way out, because we cannot dodge the responsibility. We cannot move away or shrink from our responsibility. So what should we do? We have to realize, my dear friends, we have to realize that the world is not only India or the country that you are living in. Not only the world, but the workplace also, the workplace where you are working, my dear friends. Let us try to assume that the world has become a global village. Is it not true that you're listening to a lecture to a person remotely situated, either in any part of the country or the world? So, and even if you're working in an organization, there also you feel that people who are working with you, your colleagues, your friends, your co-workers, your bosses, all these people are having different cultures. So it is actually a multicultural force to tell exactly. So the world has become a global village thanks to technology, thanks to Bharat Gupta, thanks to Beneath Saluha. And you can see the realization being felt now when all the institutes have gathered together on a common platform without the geographical vagaries, without the rigors of the travel, and then people are listening to each other, people are sharing their views. So, but then when we are doing that, we are actually bound to think that there has to be multicultural differences. And when we talk about that differences, we have to ensure that these differences ensue not only of culture, because our culture affects people's behavior. Have you not at times asked yourself why that particular person behaved in a very different manner? Why he did not speak when I put a proposal before him? You meet all these things every day, my dear friend, if you're working in organizations, in companies, in several institutions. There are situations where you find that you speak something and a person's reaction to that at times either is neutral, at times it is, quite of a different nature. And moreover, we are living in a reality where globalization has become the mantra. Today, people boast of having different brands that they are wearing. People also boast of different things that they possess. Of course, at times they also become debatable. We also know that in the past we are using certain things which we have now discarded once again because of several things, either to be quoted or not to be quoted, my dear friends. This is actually culture. So culture affects not only in one way, but then in more ways than one. The business trend, of course, had changed because of globalization. Sitting in one corner of the room, sitting in a remote village of India, you are ordering things. Online shopping has become a reality. And this is only because of the technical revolutions that are taking place. This morning, while I was going through the news item, I came to know that not only we were thinking only of the anvil of 5G, they are actually talking of 6G, my dear friends. So it is changing fast. And with this fast pace, are we not also changing? Are we not also evolving? Are we not situating ourselves also in the change scenario? We have to, because that is actually the need of the hour. We have in past signed GATT, General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. We have also been familiar with NAFTA, because of which the transactions between two nations and other nations have become a reality. But while doing so, once again, culture at times interferes. Cultures in terms of language, cultures in terms of etiquettes, cultures in terms of the new reality that has dawned. Now, think of it. Before March, we had a different culture of the entire world. The culture of meeting people, shaking their hands with each other, and only in these 6 months, a new culture has evolved. The culture of disguise, the culture of keeping our mouths shut, the culture of confining ourselves in one corner of the room, the culture of working from home, another new culture evolving, my dear friend, and the culture not of shaking hands, but of greeting only with folded hands, or at times greeting only verbally, my dear friends. So culture is a very vast term, which in course of time, this actually keeps changing, because we say culture is a dynamic process, my dear friends. Now, with the changing culture, there also recently all of us might have realized that when we are perhaps thinking of a travel which we cannot avoid, we are thinking of traveling by a taxi which can have only 2 people. There are many people who have actually stopped traveling by buses or trains, and in the days to come, because it some way or the other is sneaking into our lives silently, subtle, in a very subtle manner, and we cannot say adieu to it, my dear friends. Today, if you can get fresh flowers, that is again because of the globalization. And you have choices abroad. You have choices galore, my dear friends. You can pick and choose. Now, you see, we are living in an age, and till now, I mean, till some years ago, we were only having classes in the classes itself. And there were many of us who did not have the opportunity of listening to people from reputed institutions. Now a new culture has evolved even in educational sector. What is that culture? The culture of Swayam and NPTEL, my dear friends. Now, the classroom lectures of reputed institutions of reputed people, they are actually brought home to you without paying anything, my dear friends. Is it not a new culture? Is it not a new trend? Fine. And we have to, of course, in this trend, we actually have to be trained when we are delivering. In this new culture, we actually have to gather experience, and we are learning every day from the reactions of the people, from the feedback of the people, from the output of what we are giving and what we are thinking. Now, Professor Varat and Professor Binod Saluha might be thinking, when they might have thought of this online platform, they might have thought, what will happen to it? But these were the brave warriors who took a brave step, and today they are very proud to say that there are 2,000 people listening to these lectures. Now, in order to situate yourself in a new culture, you actually have to accept certain things. You also have to deny certain things, because you are, my dear friends, you are to adapt yourself to the changing realities, isn't it? Because there are prospects of peace, prosperity, and education. Now, every day or the other, when you turn over the pages of the newspaper, and when you actually think of the happenings that are happening all through the world, sometimes you come across some very unpleasant situations, either because of these speeches which have been given, which are actually in a way covered with certain things which we do not like. There are incidents which we think should not have been. How can we avoid all these things? These can be avoided when we think what will be the effect, what will be the offshoot of the way we communicate. And as I told you earlier, we communicate not only through words, we communicate through our actions also. Nowadays, the immigration is on the move. Of course, in the present scenario, the immigration has come to a halt. But then this is actually a different sort of realization. Maybe if things improve, and should things improve, we will again find that this immigration again starts. So we actually have to train ourselves, as I said, we have to train ourselves in a way that we get exposed to multicultural communication. Multicultural communication. And this multicultural communication will be possible only when we realize that we have to maintain a cultural diversity. Many people, many cultures, many faiths, many beliefs, many trends, many tastes, many food items, many dresses. Fine. So we have to think that the entire world, and who can be a better practitioner than our own country, India, which is actually a home to so many cultures. And throughout the world also, we keep on saying that we are a culture that believe in Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. The entire world is one family. Maybe people are talking about the globalization trend, but then we have been following it since ages, my dear friend, and that is why we are considered to be more tolerant. We are considered to be more accommodating. We are considered to be more sorry. We are considered to be more accommodating, and we are considered to be more inclusive, my dear friend, because we believe in the mantra of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Now, if culture, if we understand culture as a form of communication, because we have to say that communication is rooted in our culture, and culture is a form of communication. What you do, it actually reflects not only your individual culture, but your culture as a whole also, because culture is a complex system of values. It's a value, no? And in one country also there may be different subcultures, as I said, and customs. There have been many customs which actually have been relegated. But now what is happening? In times to come, we see that we are again moving back, and we say whatever is lost, we actually have to regain. Now, there is another new culture coming, and that is the culture of moving to our roots. In the blind race of westernization, we have some way or the other distanced ourselves from our roots. But then at a certain point of time, we start feeling that our past actually makes us suffer. And in order to relieve ourselves of the suffering, we actually try to, in a poetic way, let me tell you, we actually try to grasp our roots, and we start having a backward journey. Of course, this is possible only in literature. But then, my dear friend, what is literature? Literature is actually a reflection of lived and unlived experiences. What Bharat and Binod Saluha are doing will become a part of literature in the days to come, because they have started a new culture, and this culture will some way or the other become a reality, and this culture will keep on, not only helping people in the days to come, but generations will remember. Likewise, when we talk about cultures, not all cultures are alike. And as I said, when we are exposed to a new culture, we actually feel a sort of embarrassment. We actually feel a sort of shock, as I said in the beginning. And this shock, we have to absorb these shocks in order to prove ourselves as a better citizen of the new world. Netizens that we are, fine. Actually, culture teaches people how to think, behave, and react. Now, there has been a tendency among mankind that our culture is the only best. And that is where our growth stops, my dear friend. We also have to learn from different cultures. If it is not, why we have started enjoying the food of the South? North people enjoy the food of the South, and the South people have started enjoying the food of the North. And not only is it confined to food, but is also confined to other ways. I'm reminded of some of the festivals which once upon a time was confined only to one place, and now it has in some way or the other affected people, that this has become, this has spread like anything, and people have started observing it, my dear friends. Because as humans, all of us are extraordinarily flexible. If we are flexible, can we not realize and can we not assimilate ourselves with other cultures so that tomorrow is ours, so that tomorrow becomes beautiful, my dear friends? Now, when we talk about culture, we also have to understand what are actually the elements of culture. Hofstede says that culture actually can be realized through symbols. Every culture will have different symbols, and these symbols can be reflected through not only through festivals, but also through observation of certain rules and regulations, observation of certain beliefs, observation and maintenance of certain festivals, observation and celebration and adulation of our heroes and heroines. Now, why is it that our heroes and heroines of Mahabharata, our heroes and heroines of Mahabharata have become famous all over the world? Fine. So this is also an extension and acceptability of one culture, and this is also a sort of assimilation, my dear friends. To understand a culture, one needs to know things such as language. You will find that language also, because I am a man of language, I can see it more carefully and in a way more subtly than others, the way languages are changing. If somebody is using English, we also have to find out whether he is using American English or British English. If somebody is using a sentence where he is using the words of a different language, what he or she is doing, he is actually either code switching or code transferring. Fine. Now the question is, sometimes while you are using these languages, while we are doing these processes, we are also popularizing many words which in the past were not. There are many words we'll talk in the course of our lecture, which once upon a time was not so popular, have gained momentum. And to tell you the truth, my dear friends, and most of you realize that how with the advance of technology, many new words, especially because of the onbill of computers, there have been many new words which have been found, which have actually become a reality and which is being used very frequently. Maybe that was not. For example, the input and the output, to take a very common example, has come from computer. Now another word like spam, which was not earlier, has come from the computer. And this happens because this affects not only among the careful users, but then also those ordinary people who till date were not familiar with, they have also started using it. So language and gestures, appearance, social relationships, you maintain some sort of relationship, and when you maintain a relationship, you also have certain preferences, how much space to give to a person, how many times to meet a person, and when and at what time to meet a person. Of course, this technical revolution has in some way shattered this notion of dignity and notion of meeting people, because we say it is an anytime meeting, anytime learning, my dear friend. And that has really some curses have been broken, some curses have been broken. There are also times when we talk of the stories, they also in a way reflect our culture. Religion, many of the religions of the world, they have their own cultures, and religion is one of the parameters of culture. So when we are unknown to, when we are unfamiliar with one religion and we do something that is not approved of in that religion, we actually have to be very careful. And then family customs, fine. Of course, because of the globalization and the technical revolution, there has actually been a different sort of opinion. The relationships have become very crucial, and actually a lot of attention should be now given to relationship, because every now and then new relationships are in the offing, and the old relationship which once upon a time used to be considered very valuable, they are actually fading away, my dear friends. And then of course communication style and communication systems. Now, in order to assimilate ourselves with a new culture, and in order to prove ourselves that we belong to a global culture, what can be done, my dear friends? Cultures can be learned. Every new culture is different for us. That is why one thing that all of us should understand is that cultures can be learned. It is not that we people, we often feel that our culture is the only culture that is best of all. Fine. You will come to realize, my dear friends, that in this present stage of lockdown, you will come to realize that there were many cultures which followed this quarantine in a different manner in the olden days, my dear friends. And today we find that this has become a reality. Cultural norms are logical. If we go back to culture, we find a culture will have several myths. And all these myths, even though we consider at times that these are myths, myths have taken a negative connotation. But my dear friends, when these myths were practiced in the past, they actually had a sort of logical reasoning. You go back to your own culture and you find out, and you will find that there is a logic behind it. Culture represents our identity and also our community. Which culture you belong to. When a person speaks, the way a person behaves, what he or she does is he is actually reflecting his culture. There are many cultures where people speak very softly. There are many cultures where people speak very loud. There are many cultures where people begin something with a question. There are many cultures where people do not entertain a stranger. Of course, there are many cultures where people are actually welcome even to strangers. There are many cultures where two people not knowing each other for at least some period of time, they do not call each other to their houses. So cultures are different, and it actually mixes both the visible and the invisible. Those who have read the novel Namesake might realize how the boy Gogol had to face the problems of culture, because the father was from the parents were from a different culture, and the son being of a second generation citizen to America, so he was having a different culture, and how the cultures clashed and how it actually posed a problem to Gogol, who ultimately becomes the sufferer. So culture is dynamic, my dear friends. Now, when we talk about culture, it is actually also pertinent to talk about in order to maintain a culture, we also have to, because we will, in a way, will be exposed to a different culture. But then when you are exposed to a different culture, what actually are the ethics that we are to maintain? If we feel ourselves and find ourselves maintaining some amount of ethical consideration, perhaps we will not be hurting other cultures. And how is that possible? So there are some ways which actually have been talked about and expressed by some scholars who say that there can be 4 ways. And what are those 4 ways? And what are those 4 branches? Western. So when we talk about the Western culture, because we have to understand the key ingredients of all these cultures, because when we are going to be exposed to those realities, we may not err. Of course, to err is human, but to forgive is divine. So Western culture believes in autonomy, justice, responsibility, and care. You will come across many situations where even if they have to say something bitter, what they do is they start with saying better things. For example, in one culture, even when they have to criticize, so criticism comes at the last. But before that, they will appreciate and they will ask you how many people are there in your family members. They will all talk about the niceties. But ultimately, they are going to criticize you. So that is one way, that is one of the forms of a culture. But then when they do so, they also see to it that they take care also. Care is also part of culture. When we talk about African culture, they actually believe in the well-being of the entire community, my dear friend. Well-being of the entire community. And one of the scholars who has an expertise in African culture says, Persons become persons only after a process of incorporation. This incorporation is assimilation. So we have to, because we are following certain beliefs, certain values, certain systems, but then in order to become a better person, we actually have to take care of incorporating something new from the other culture. Without incorporation into this or that community, individuals are considered to be mere danglers who are dangling in and between, a thing of in-between thing. We remain, many of you who have experienced the diasporic experiences might have felt how we are dangling between two cultures, oscillating between two cultures. We are either trying to go back to our own culture, or we are trying to learn a new culture, and in and between, we are in a suspended animation, my dear friend. So, to whom the description person does not fully apply, fine? So, and then when we talk about Buddhist culture, it actually talks about individualistic pattern, individualistic behavior. Whatever you do, the responsibility rests with you. Responsibility rests with you, my dear friends. And then Hindu culture, which is more accommodating and inclusive. But then the dharma of that is you have to end suffering through intervention, through assertive intervention. And that is how Hindus believe in the philosophy of karma. And then we talk about Islamic, which is also based on different religious concepts. There are other major dimensions of culture, contexts. When we are talking, when we're communicating in a different cultural atmosphere, we also have to understand what is the context, what should be said, what, when. And then individualism. Every individual is different. Sometimes what we do is we actually make a generalized statement, we create a sort of generalization, and that actually hampers the growth, and hampers the growth not only of relationship, but if we're having a business relationship, that will also halt that relationship. And then formality, then we'll also talk about communication style, and then time orientation. My dear friends, when we talk about culture, and culture as either as a sort of impediment in communication, or as a sort of something that can complement our communication, we actually have to be very much conscious of. And for that, we actually have to follow ethical consideration when we are communicating in a different culture. Now, what is this ethical communication about? We have to address people, because most of the time we are actually suffering from the illusion that we treat a person and we feel that this is actually approved gesture. Not, my dear friend. When you become ethical, you have to address people of other cultures with the same motive, that with the same treatment that you want to receive. And this will actually stop you from becoming over judgmental, from becoming extra, judgmental, because at times when you become judgmental, it is not a wise thing to be judgmental. You should not jump to the conclusion too soon. When we are trying to become ethically correct, we have to describe the world as accurately as possible. I mean, not creating a sort of image, a sort of hallucination, not thinking, not simply blowing upon your own trumpet, but trying to understand what is others' culture, because they also have certain things which we have to appreciate, we have to understand, and we should not belittle their cultures. To encourage and respect people of other cultures, that their culture is unique. And if you are exposed to more cultures, then you will find the world becomes a very beautiful place to live in, my dear friend. And it is always better to think about the commonalities of two cultures. Of course, when we talk about the demonstration of a certain thing, that may be different, but then try to find out the commonalities of two cultures rather than differences, in order to avoid a sort of judgment that is going to harm others, my dear friend. For example, let's take an example. When we are communicating with the Germans, you'll find that Germans are necessarily, Germans smile less. If you have a talk with a German person, you'll find they smile less. But that can be interpreted differently by different people. For the US person, they will feel that German people are very hideous. Whereas, on the other hand, Germans say that US or the Americans, they are excessively cheerful. They're excessively cheerful. In German culture, when even for a business assignment, when you are being said yes by the person on the other side, that yes does not mean yes in true sense of the term, meaning thereby yes does not reflect that the other person agrees to your proposal, my dear friend. So saying yes saying yes in Japan does not mean being agreeable. So you have to be very particularly conscious. Rather than when somebody in Japan says yes, that actually means that they are listening to you. They're actually providing a hearing to you. That does not actually mean that they are agreeable. During business, you'll find it is always advisable, because now we cannot get ourselves confined only to one culture. We have to get exposed to other cultures as well. So it is always advisable to be aware of inaccurate assumptions. Now, what are these inaccurate assumptions? Not only in terms of business, but when we talk about law, when we talk about the legal issues, you will find in certain cultures, when you are alleged, you will find that you are not you are innocent unless and until you are proved guilty. But in some cultures like Mexico and Turkey, you are guilty till you are not proved innocent. So this is how, when you talk about cultures, cultures vary not in terms of behavior, but also in terms of law, also in terms of regulation, my dear friends. Now, there is another important thing about culture, and that is formality. Majority of humans on this earth, they believe in a tradition, and they have certain ceremonies to perform and social rules also to follow. When we talk about Americans in general, they are more casual, they are direct, and they come to point very soon. As I said earlier, that even if they have to criticize, what they will do is they will simply talk about some niceties, but they are aware of their own goals. They will criticize you at last. If you are having a business deal with Mexicans, these Mexicans often feel hurt when you ask them to get down to business, because in their culture, it is not wise to tell anyone to get down to business. And in Japanese, in India, when we meet each other, we find that we exchange our cards. So in Japan also, exchange of cards and signing documents is considered as a ritual. Moreover, there are other things also about the deliberations of culture, which we shall discuss in the next lecture. When we talk about Europeans, they never use first name without having your introduction for some days. Arabian, South Americans, and Asians, they actually talk first, and then they talk about business later. As regards Western countries, they are more relaxed about social status and power. When we talk about the communication style, because communication and culture are correlated. So as I said earlier, once again, Americans appear to be very straightforward, and if a talk goes between an American and an Asian, Asians often believe that silence is a time for buying notions, buying agreements, but then they cannot, especially Americans, they feel very uncomfortable when there is silence and delays. So we talk about something, for example, you see, when there is a business deal between an American and a French, or say a Japanese, you will find even when they talk to each other, because the Japanese people, they speak too less. Fine. Whereas Americans, they speak too much, and at times they speak loud also. So they cannot tolerate silence and delays. They take words very literally. Whereas when we talk about Japanese, They are not only confined to accruing or interpreting meaning only from the words, but also from non-words. Whereas when we talk about Nigerians, they appear quiet and clear. And when we talk about Germans, they are actually direct but understated. So these are some of the parameters of cultures in communication. And when we are communicating with a different culture, what we can do is we actually have to become very much aware of. These communication styles will vary. In the next lecture, we shall be talking at length about how different cultures, people of different cultures, how they behave differently when it either comes to signing a deal or when it either comes to negotiate. You know, negotiation styles are also different. You will find that when negotiations are held between two parties, both Japanese and Chinese, they do not speak much. Rather, they have a third party for it. And when we talk about contract may mean the beginning of a relationship for Chinese people and Japanese people, whereas in certain countries, especially in America, the signing of a contract means the end. Right? Relationship is not given too much of emphasis. Americans and Germans, they emphasize on words, whereas in Greece, Greek people treat contract as a formal statement. Japanese, they are well-meaning people and they believe contract to be a statement of intention, a statement of intention. When we talk about Mexicans, artistic exercises are to be accomplished in an ideal world. That is why they are also very flexible in terms of time. When there's a meeting with Mexicans, they actually talk of the issues or the agenda of the meeting later. But before that, they make a lot of eating and they make a lot of discussion. But the real discussion takes place only after the exchange of all these greetings. Especially for Arabs, contract is considered to be insulting by different. So we are trying our level best that we should try to keep ourselves away from insulting others, hurting others, and that is possible only when we get exposed to the nuances of culture, which are actually rooted in certain communication styles and certain uses of words and phrases, which we shall be discussing in the next talk that we are going to have after some time. As regards time, you will find we say that Asians are punctual. I don't know how many of you agree because we are also a part of Asian culture. But then in certain cultures, when you are late, no, if you are late, people also look at their wristwatches in order to tell you that you are late. North Americans actually treat time as a commodity, and especially among about Japanese, it is said that when they are going to decide either about a contract or something, they actually sit silently for some time. They take time to decide. In one instance, I read somewhere that a Japanese, while he was going to sign a deal, when everything was told, what he did was he closed his eyes, sat there for some time, and then finally decided. As regards Hispanics, they are more relaxed regarding time. Of course, time means money in US, but then time can be interpreted differently in different cultures, my different. About the role of culture in communication, all that I can say is culture not only binds, but culture blinds also. Culture unites, culture divides. Culture rejoices, culture reveals, cultures at times makes us keep silent, culture at times makes us speak loud. When we talk about legal differences, people in low cultural context, we are going to talk about cultural context in the next lecture. So people of low cultural context, they actually, as I have been saying, they value written word too much and they consider written word as binding, whereas people of high culture, they are a bit flexible. As I have been saying, that Japanese not only believe in words, rather they also try to find out the essence through non-words. I mean, the silence after a word is spoken. And people in low cultural contexts, they adhere to law, and then when they talk about law, they are actually, so fishy about law that we can here be reminded of an incident that one author has mentioned in his book, that a Danish woman had left her little child in a stroller outside a restaurant, and she was dining inside the restaurant. Now, some people, and this restaurant was in Manhattan in USA, and when some US people, they saw the child in the stroller outside, they informed the police, and the lady was taken into custody. Finally, the lady had to call the embassy of her country, and people from that embassy later on told that it was a usual practice in Denmark to leave the children outside the restaurant in a stroller. And not only this, they also sent the pictures, and only then the lady was released. My dear friends, so when we talk about culture, culture is such a thing that, as I said, it not only binds, but it also blinds at times. People in US and UK, they are often presumed innocent unless and until they are proved guilty. Whereas people in Mexico and Turkey, they are presumed guilty unless they are proved innocent. So when we are not exposed to a new culture, we are innocent. But then innocence is only the first step to learning. And with the contribution of Professor Bharat and Saluha and others, they are actually converting this innocence into experience. And this experience we will realize in the next talk, which will be followed after a 5 minutes break. Thank you very much for your patience, my dear friends. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. I am Vineet from MNIT. Thanks for actually accepting our request and being here. We are very privileged and very glad to have you here. I think Amit will take Bharat and Dr. Bharat.
Yes.
Question answer session.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, sir, with the sir's permission, like I can take some questions, or otherwise we can shift it to at the last.
I think it would be better if we take the questions towards the end.
Yes, sure, sir. Sure, sir. And we are just noting it down, and at the last we will take. So we will go for 5 minutes break. Again, we assemble here at like 11:14.
Of course.
Yeah.
On the same link.
Yes, sir. Same link. Same link. Everything is.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we will remain connected, sir. We'll all remain connected, sir.
Okay, fine.